Hey, Shannon, welcome to the Ultimate QA podcast. Super nice to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I've watched quite a few of your podcasts, and I'm excited to be one of the people on one of them now. I'm Shannon Vincent. I'm from York, Pennsylvania. I've been in QA for about 10 years. I'm currently the QA manager at a financial institution for the past 4 years. We focus primarily on a lot of mobile applications, web applications for the financial institution. We're still a small group. We kind of got set up around 2018. The business units were doing a lot of the testing before that, but now we actually have a centralized department, which I'm happy to be running. So, it's just more growth day and day and day, more growth.
Oh, wow, that's super interesting that you all got set up in 2018 because I was doing a little bit of research about your company, and I think it's been around for a long time, since 1934, if
Yep.
I understood correctly, right? So, what was happening from 1934 until 2018 in terms of the QA efforts then?
That is a good question. I ask a lot of the people, we have a lot of tenor people there that have been there for years and years. So I asked them the same question. And again, a lot of that fell onto the business units, where it's not primarily their job, it's just an extra hat that they wear. So, they get busy. They have their own day-to-day activities. So I know that they're very appreciative that we have our own QA department now to help them out with that. Outside of that, yeah, I think that my financial institution now that we're starting to see QA more as an investment and not just an expense or like a cover our butts or some type like that. Like we actually see the value of it and it's not just supposed to be another hat that somebody in a different position is wearing.
Yeah, I love to hear that. We'll talk about that point in a moment. I certainly want to touch on it. Uh, Another question that came up in my mind when you mentioned that is, so from 1934 to 2018, that's a long time of not having a good quality assurance process. What prompted then creating a quality assurance process? Was there like some kind of a significant event?
That is a good question. And it was actually right before I came on board at the financial institution. We did a conversion, like a core conversion of our entire system. So I think they saw with that load of work that the business unit can't hold up all that testing and then still do their day-to-day business. We're doing this conversion, we're doing this big migration. We still have to make things work day to day and keep the lights on. And so we started bringing in a few consultants, and they saw how well the consultants were working, and we just kind of started forming our own department internally then. Again, we're fairly small. We have about 5 people internally, but we do have others outside of the organization that are full-time employees.
Nice. Yeah, it's very interesting. I'd be curious if later you can find out what maybe caused. I mean, I guess if it was just overwork and overload for the business unit, I guess that makes sense, which is interesting. And I wonder if any kind of like large significant quality events happened that prompted this as well. Because you know what it makes me think about is quality assurance a lot of times is either added because of a disaster or a preventative measure. And so I'm curious what it would be in this case.
Yeah, I would say it was more on the preventative measure, just because we were going onto a whole new platform, financial stuff like that's a very secure lockdown type of organization. People don't like to be like their money to be messed with. So making sure that everything's secure and making sure we have that extra layer of security for our members and anybody that's included within our organization.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That makes sense. So another interesting point that you mentioned was that you've had some success making the organization realize that QA is an investment versus a cost center, which from what I've seen, a lot of organizations consider QA a cost center. So how were you able to create this kind of belief, I would say, this kind of like view around the quality assurance section?
Luckily, we work very closely hand in hand with our member experience team, and they're just showing that if we're not QAing this stuff, our members aren't going to get the experience that they should have, and what we want them to have, and that's kind of what we pride ourselves on, members first, everything like that. So if we're not doing that, we're not sticking to our word, more or less. I think I also was able to bring some more sight to the QA department by starting to do more accessibility testing, things that are actually important that we can reach to other members that may need that accessibility testing done, things like that, and just making the department a little bit more than just manual testing, to say the least. Again, we're still a little green, but we're spreading out here.
Yeah, very cool. You mentioned accessibility testing. How did you bring that in? Because you know what I find is that, like in EU, for example, accessibility is now mandatory by law. In US, it's not. And so what I find is a lot of organizations, they know it's important and they say it's important, but they don't do anything about it. But then you're actually doing something about it. How did you make that happen?
So when I came on board, I was talking to some of our consultants and some of our friends outside of the financial institution. And, we were just talking about bigger banks that, being hit with these lawsuits. And it's not like we're just doing it because we don't want to be hit with the lawsuit. We actually care about our members and our customers. Once I started talking to them a little bit more, got some more detail of how we can do this internally and use some additional help from outside resources. We started getting VPAT reports, that show the compliance level and everything about 2 times a year and trying to be within like that 80% compliance range. We're never going to be 100%, especially how things are changing constantly with the standards and the criteria. But yeah, it's been very successful. And I've spoken to the executive leadership multiple times, and they love to hear it, especially our legal department. They love to hear it.
Cool. Okay. So it's both prevention of lawsuits, right, from a legal perspective, and also a keeping certain customers happy that do have accessibility needs, right?
Exactly. Yep. 'Cause we didn't even realize that once we started doing the accessibility testing, our member experience team started going through some of the tickets that we would get in and customer complaints. And some of them were definitely, they went hand in hand, like I can't deposit this check because my screen reader, or I can't do this or this. And, we started looking at those and we're like, okay, we can fix these things. Let's do that for them and follow up. So definitely providing a better member experience for them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay. So, yeah, improving the customer experience, member experience. That's beautiful. What about like the lawsuits that you all were facing? Like, what were those about?
We actually weren't facing any, but we were trying to, be preventative again. Bank of America went through some, I believe Wells Fargo did. So just kind of looking at the current market, and we're like, we don't want to be one of those people, and we want to make sure that our customers are happy with what we're giving them. So again, more of a preventative measure, and I'm glad that I got the organization on board with it.
Yeah, beautiful. How are you all doing accessibility testing?
So right now we're doing manual testing. We are starting at the dev level, but even with UX and documentation, we're hoping to build that out first, starting with accessibility in mind. And then dev has been using some of the tools that QA uses, just like the screen readers, the basic ones, to make sure before they pass it over to us. Then we'll go through, and I have a manual tester completely dedicated just to accessibility. That's all she does completely. And I think that has helped tremendously. Like, it is a job in itself. I can't really pull my other testers away from things, and just even to know all that knowledge of what is accessible and all the criteria, you kind of need a subject matter expert for that.
Okay, cool. So there's a subject matter expert
Well,
that understands the domain and does that full time.
yep, that's correct.
Do you know what kind of tools they're using?
Yeah, so I know for the most part, they use multiple different screen readers. JAWS is a well-known one. We're actually outside of the manual tester, we are using some automated scanning too, just kind of as another preventative measure. There's a few different ones out there like Moncito, UsableNet. There's a bunch of different ones. So we actually just engaged in a new endeavor with another automated scanning software. And so far, that's been working very well. I know it doesn't cover everything that a manual tester would do, but again, it's another layer to that piece of testing and making sure we're good.
Yeah, sure. That's cool. Yeah. And it's probably faster to execute and in a more automated way. And so you can just kind of get a report and take action on the report, right?
Yes, exactly. And it's more or less just kind of bringing everybody up to speed. We can do the testing and we can find all of these issues, but we need the dev team on board too because they need to fix them then. So testing's only as good as if it's going to get fixed then.
Yeah. How are you prioritizing accessibility issues amongst everything else you guys have to do?
I would say our strategic projects are obviously priority. We have a lot of them going on right now, but we're trying to build the accessibility within those project timelines so that we're not backfilling, you know. So it's not like we're releasing this big project, all these new enhancements, and now we go back and do it. So we're trying to build that within it. It's coming along, but it's a hard thing, you know, when it's a new kind of item to throw into a project timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. I love that you all are able to build that in from the project plan versus kind of retrofitting it afterwards.
Yeah, it's been a not a struggle, but it's just something different, you know. It wasn't something we were used to doing before, and we're gonna learn how to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like all new endeavors are like that, right? Where you have to get over the inertia of starting the thing, and then you have to get over the challenges of figuring out how to do the thing in the beginning, and then get into a flow where things are more comfortable, and then it's just tweaking and iterating on the process towards success.
Exactly. Yep. And I think we're getting to that point where we're tweaking and everything. You know, so I feel like we made a lot of strides, and I'm happy where we're at, but we still have a little bit to go.
Yeah, cool. So what's next? Like, what do you see as the vision of testing for you all in, let's say, 3 to 5 years?
So definitely more automation, as I'm sure all QA managers would say. Right now, we only have one
Yeah,
automation engineer, and that's a lot of work for one person, to say the least.
yeah,
So he's been kind of backfilling, going through our manual test cases, getting those all set up and everything. So definitely onboarding some more people for automation, maybe cross training for that. I actually talked to quite a few different QA consulting groups and different groups that have newer software about, you know, AI is like the biggest thing now. So we've been looking a lot into that. You know, if we don't start looking into it now, we're going to fall behind. You know, there's
yeah,
still security risks and things that we need to be cautious about, but that's going to be the future regardless, and we're going to have to get over that. So I
yes,
see that being the next
yeah,
2 to 3 years, you know, diving more into that, making sure we're getting a little bit more automated. We're never going to be able to cut out manual testing, and I don't want to. I mean, there's just something about having like an actual person looking at things, and it's just that human consciousness, you know, of you're seeing things differently than a script running.
yeah. Totally agree with you. I think for some reason in the industry, somehow there was created a dichotomy of like it's either automated testing or manual testing. And I don't think they need to be opposing forces. They should be collaborative forces that are working together. Because as you said, like ultimately with automation, what happens is it's code that you write that will ultimately end up making assertions based on what you want to check in the application, but everything else is not checked. And so if you're not asserting on certain things, those certain things will be missed versus like a human being. We can look at a context of something, and even though we're like aimed towards one goal, we might be able to notice something else over here. And we're like, oh, this is weird. And then go on that exploration journey and discover something that wasn't an intended behavior of the application. And for automated testing, that's really hard to do that.
I completely agree. And my team, we're all really good with going down rabbit holes, and that's not such a bad thing. Like you were saying, you know, we're looking at one thing and then we shift over here. And for some jobs, that's not probably the best thing, but for us, it kind of works to our benefit when we do that.
For sure. And I think that a lot of what good testing is an exploration journey. I mean, like there's the whole idea of exploratory testing is it's interacting with the system, seeing where there's weird behavior, and then figuring out how and why that weird behavior is occurring so that we can prevent it from happening to our end users.
Yep, I fully agree. And something about my team is I know it's not like this at every organization, but my QA team, we work so closely with the programmers. You know, normally there's that like dog and cat like mentality between QA and programmers, but we have a beautiful relationship, and I think that that really helps out, you know, with identifying the problems, trying to find out where the problem lies, and it's just that constant communication that really helps us, you know, build our quality in general.
That's beautiful. I love that. It's another, I think, you're touching on another similar point again of collaboration
Yeah.
versus not versus competition. I found that to be a common thread in my career as like I have worked with different kinds of organizations to help them implement automated testing. Found that organizations where teams collaborate more closely versus being like siloed, the teams that collaborate more closely are the ones that are more successful because you can exchange. There's many reasons, but one of the reasons you can exchange information a lot faster, and just by humans collaborating, better ideas and outcomes can be created.
I completely agree. And, we kind of live in at my financial institution, we kind of live in like a multi like universe of somewhat agile, somewhat waterfall still. Like we kind of do our own thing, but we have our like daily stand ups and stuff. So we take pieces of it, but it keeps that collaboration going. So we're not fully agile, but enough where we're in constant communication with each other throughout every day.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point. What does your like, let's say, let's say you want to develop a feature. What does that process look like in terms of designing it and then developing it and then testing it and so on? How does that look in your organization?
Yeah, so QA and programming, we're very aligned with the business units, with member experience, we call them. So we have analysts over there that are kind of like, BAs, but yeah, they're digital analysts and they create the documentation. They'll get the requirements from even like call centers, things like that, start building it. And then we'll do review sessions together. Again, it's very collaborative. We review it all together, make sure that we're all on the same page. Dev is building what they're being asked to build. We're understanding and how to build our test cases off of what they're being asked to build. And, we just we all work together through the entire process. We have our sprints, so we're meeting 2 times a week, and to just make sure that we're all on where we should be.
How long are your guys' sprints?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And so in those 2 weeks, is a feature being developed and tested, or is that 2 weeks just for development?
So it depends where we land with the last sprint. So again, we're not fully agile. We're definitely not doing things by the agile book, to say the least.
Sure. Yeah,
But
sure.
So yeah, for the most part, like right now we have a really big strategic project that we're working on. So pretty much everything that's in these sprints are all features that are going into this. They're not going to be released right away, but they are like the ones that we're testing. So within that, development should be wrapping up within, that first week, and then testing should continue to occur in that next week. Again, some of these features are a little bit bigger, so it's going to carry over into the next sprint, which is expected, at least on our end. We understand that.
And how often are you all releasing a feature to production?
So we have a web release, a mobile release, and an API release. The API can normally go out on its own. Sometimes we need to get it out before the front end stuff. So those are kind of ad hoc, a little more frequent than the other ones. But yeah, normally we'll do a web release and then 2 weeks later do a mobile release, 2 weeks later do a web, back and forth, and that can shift, depending on if there's any hot fix or any dire needs that we need to throw something in there and get it out to the members.
Okay, super cool. And so the API, what is that? What are you all using that for?
So that is where all the calls are being made for our mobile application and our web application. We do have a tester doing that, and sometimes my automation tester, he's been automating some of the API test cases, and we've been just using Postman. We actually haven't even tested API until I think we started doing it in 2020 because I think the thought was, if we're testing the front end, that means the API is working, but sometimes things just don't work that way. So to take an extra level of caution, we started testing the API then through Postman and some other ways.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's exactly like you said. The UI may not always be connected to all of the components of the APIs, right? And so you need to exercise those by themselves. But also, what's nice about doing API testing is that it's typically faster and more robust than like testing through the user interface. And
Yeah.
so we can test a lot of like functionality that is living in the user interface, but test it through the APIs and then do less user interface testing because we've covered certain critical functionality through the API testing.
Yep, I've definitely seen that, and I think it has reduced our testing time. That is one of our things, trying to figure out how we can reduce that testing time. We don't want to cut back on the quality, but we're
Yes.
looking. Kind of goes to another point that I was thinking of is our main thing is trying to figure out that sweet spot for risk-based testing because it's like, we're being told we test too much, but then if something pops up, well, why didn't you test it? So there's like no winning. It's like, well, do we not
Yeah.
test enough? Do we test too much? So we're trying to find that sweet spot, and I don't know if that exists, but we're trying.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful point. Like where QAs are not rewarded for the work that they do when they prevent stuff, but then they are punished when something where we're responsible and may or may not be punished, but we're certainly responsible when something does leak out to production. It's like, why wasn't that caught? It's a very interesting dilemma to be in.
Yes, so we're trying to work on that. It's always going to be there a little bit in the background. So just trying to find, like I said, that sweet spot of the balance that we need for adequate testing and keeping the quality that we need.
Have you found some like good lessons, good takeaways in that journey that you can share with us?
So far, really, I think the most is that my testers, they're very thorough, and as they should be. We want good QA. We do. But sometimes they're a little too thorough. So I have made it a point here and there to go back with them and review test cases. And there's some, even like little things like that is actually taking up time. Like, they start their test case from a login and like they have that as a test case, but then they start with login again. It's just even how they structure the test cases, like you don't have to go
Mm.
back and do that piece again. You don't need to do that step again in another test suite or in another test case. You're already there. So even just like those little things, I already see, cutting back on some of that time. If you have any recommendations, I'm all for it too. How to make some more risk-based testing efforts.
Yeah, so we're talking about manual or automated testing here because they're
This was
different.
manual, and our automation is
Okay.
actually based off of our manual test cases. So that's
Yeah.
where it kind of came to light even more. My automation engineer, he was like, I'm, re-scripting the same thing over and over again. And he's like, I should be doing that. Like, I should just keep going. Like, and I was like, well, that's how manual testing should be too. Like, so that's kind of how that got brought to light.
Yeah, that's I totally agree with you on the approach that like, yeah, I mean for manual testing, if you're already like logged in, for example, and you're on a page, you can explore that page and move on through
Hmm.
other areas of the application and explore those and test those. For automated testing, I actually think it's different. I think that for automated testing, what you want to do is you want to have atomic tests, which are tests that check only an individual component. And so sometimes that might mean logging in and doing an operation. Other times it might mean using an API to authenticate, not logging in through the UI and going to like a separate page and ensuring that the functionality that you want to test is tested versus going through the entire flow with automation through code. It's actually easier to bypass different states of the application than it is with manual testing.
That makes complete sense. And that even kind of makes me think of, like I said, we got a new software for our accessibility scans. And with that, there is different ways that you can use it. You can do it as a full scan of the entire application, or you can go through and create workflows. Working with my team, the one that I have as an admin on there, we found that it is better to, chunk them up into workflows, not just let it run through the whole thing because we're going to keep hitting the same things and it's harder to decipher where these like issues are coming from. So yeah, I definitely agree with that and can see it even within that scanning, that automation as well.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting is like there is always a new challenge to be solved in technology, right? It's like now I guess it sounds like one of the areas you're looking to improve upon is how much time you all are spending on testing to ensure that you're doing it as efficiently as possible. And then when you get to a new point there, then you'll have another challenge to solve is maybe like, okay, great, now we're doing it efficiently, how do we add more automation to make us even more efficient? And then you have automation and you're like, okay, now how do we introduce continuous integration to make it even faster and more automatic? And how do we give better signals back more frequently? And so just like always keeps going. And now it's like with AI, you're like, okay, can we use AI somewhere to make us even better with all without reducing quality? So it's a always a fun, never ending journey of growth.
Yeah, I always tell my team, I'm like, "Hey guys, it's job security. Like they need us. They need us." So, but no, that is the thing too. And with AI, like some of the stuff that I saw, some of the demos that I saw have been great. It's just, a matter of you put it into practice then. And some of it, you put in the requirements, you turn out some test cases, but again, that relies on what requirements you're getting. So the requirements still need to be good also. So there's a lot of pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a beautiful point. Talk to me about some of those AI tools that you are exploring and what kind of value you're hoping they can provide you.
Yeah, so for the most part, kind of like how I was mentioning with the, if we have a requirements document, being able to kind of put that through some of the things that I've seen is, within an Excel, they have the requirements, they put it through a software, and it'll start giving you some test case scenarios or ideas step by step. Again, it's not going to be it will be automated, but we're going to need somebody manually to go in there and check and see, what it's turning out. It's not going to be just like, oh, we don't need our manual testers anymore. We still need to check these, make sure it's capturing all the scenarios. But I think it would be a good tool just in case, if we are missing any scenarios or if we're not thinking outside of the box, this could be kind of a way to be like, oh, I didn't think of that. Here's a test case scenario that they said about. So some of them seem pretty promising. Again, I feel like my organization, we're still very new with it. We're still just diving into it. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to come with that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Really good to know. So you're looking for basically transforming requirements to automated tests. You mentioned that you still need someone to basically act as an orchestrator, as I would maybe call it a conductor of
Hmm.
the test and make sure that they're good and make sense and doing the right things. And is that all in the pursuit of becoming more efficient at testing without decreasing quality?
Yes, I would say so. Right now, we're spending a lot of time creating test cases. Just for an example, we're doing a very big strategic project right now, and we're up to 3,000 test cases created. And the estimate is that we're going to have probably 5,000 to 6,000 by the end of it. And if my main people are working on creating these test cases, they're not executing, obviously. So that's good and all
Yeah.
that we're creating these very quickly, but we're not seeing
Yeah.
the progress if we're not executing. So it would be a tremendous help to, have something step in or, to help us do that test case creation.
Yeah, wow, 6,000 test cases. Now, is that for your main platform? Is that for another application that you're building? What is that for?
So this is for our digital banking, our mobile application, and our online banking application, all the authenticated pieces.
The most important app, right? For
Yeah,
you guys. For all banks, I think, right?
we're definitely we're doing a big upgrade with that. It's going to be more person centric. So instead of having to log out and go into a different account, say you had two accounts, you'll be able to just to do it right there. And I know a lot of banks have that, so this was a long time coming, but there's a lot of different scenarios. Like if you have 12 different accounts, so who's seeing what, all that. So it's a
Yeah.
lot of testing, a lot of scenarios.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with financial institutions, you all have to be very careful in that because you are handling people's money. It's actually, I was having a beautiful conversation with Roy Moya in one of the previous interviews. He's head of QA engineering in working for a company out of Boston. And we were talking about like there are these critical industries like aerospace, there's my funny thumbnail. Aerospace and flights and finance, where QA is so critical because it deals with people's lives.
Yeah,
And so
I
like
completely agree.
mistakes there like really hurt people.
Yep, I agree. It kind of goes back to where I'm saying that I believe my organization is looking at it as, not an expense anymore. And it really is an investment. We're investing in our customers. We're investing in, new members or new customers that are looking for another financial institution and, just keeping the ones that we have.
I love that. That's so beautiful. Okay. So I just want to get that out of my head. Circling back to okay, you're going to have 1,000 test cases for this updated functionality that you all are applying to your most critical applications that ultimately interface with your users and keep your bank going and generating revenue. Are these all manual browser tests or are they all types of tests?
So these are all manual ones, and when I say that number, so a lot of them could be duplicates because we test on multiple browsers. So we could have one test case that turns into four, like it's on like Chrome, Firefox, Safari. So it could be multiples of that. The same with the mobile test cases. We're going to do iOS, we're going to do Android, we'll do an iPad if we need to, if we have time for it. Some are lower priority than others, but so yes, we'll be doing cross browser and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And okay, and that makes sense. And that's why they multiply so quickly, which is still a very fair thing to assume because, like, yes, okay, let's say you're like, I don't know, logging in and adding money to your account on Chrome. It doesn't mean that it'll be exactly the same functionality on Safari. Chrome and Safari are probably your guys' top two browsers as they are at most organizations, but they are very different because they run on different rendering engines.
Yep, and it definitely helps with development too. If we do find an issue, normally that's the first question they'll ask us, like, "Oh, does this work on this browser then?" And so we try and cover that before they even have to ask us it.
Yeah, cool, cool. Okay, that makes sense. Which leads me to another question. I guess you all are already supporting all of these platforms. Chrome, you mentioned Chrome, Safari, Firefox, iOS, and Android.
Yeah, and we also do a lot of different Android devices. We do use an emulator for. I have some people that's offshore, so I can't really physically give them a device unless they have their own device. So we do have a device farm, to say the least. So that helps out. But again, sometimes the quality of the device farm, you don't know if it's an actual bug or if it could be a bug from the device farm. So we try to stick to our physical devices.
Okay, so you all have a device farm of physical devices you maintain in the office?
So no, so we outsource for that. We go with a different software, but we have like our own devices in our device cabinet. But for those that are in India that's working for us, it's not like they can get into the office to get our own physical devices. So we use a software that we can all use other devices that we might not have purchased, or for those consultants that can't get to them, the physical ones.
Okay, so they have access to,
The
like, are
device
you talking
farm.
about like a Labs or like a browser stack
Yeah.
or something
Yep.
else?
Yeah. That's exactly
Okay,
it.
okay. So they're accessing real devices through those or emulators and simulators or both?
Both. Yeah. So the licenses that we have through there, they can do either or. But I mean, for the most part, it has been working pretty well. I know it's all the device farms are very similar. We use quite a few of them. We went through two different companies in the past 3 years, I think, and both of them had their
Mm.
pros and cons. None of them, nothing's going to be perfect, but for what it is, we
Yeah.
don't have to go and buy all these different phones, ship them to India, ship them to wherever my consultants are. So it's a blessing.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because I don't know if you know, I actually used to work for Sauce Labs. I used to be a solutions architect there. And so I was helping a lot of companies all over the world implement automated testing for Sauce Labs. So I'm very familiar with everything that's happening. What has been your experience? You mentioned it's a blessing to have these services where they do have the physical devices that you can access virtually. But like, what has been like pros and cons for you of using this kind of service?
Yeah, and I wish I would have known this before. I actually had my team write up a whole list, like, because we're working with Soft Labs now, so who knows? You and I could have probably worked together before. But
Yeah.
yeah. So for the most part, it's kind of latency problems. Sometimes it's a little bit slow to load the app, but that's understandable. Sometimes it's just kind of the visuals. What we saw, we would be putting in bugs for things not looking how they're supposed to, and really like on the physical device, it did look how it was supposed to. It was just on Sauce Labs, and
Wow.
yeah, it was like a case by case basis. And again,
Yeah.
we reported these problems, and we go from there. So we have to keep conscious of that some things might not be a bug like on our end before we report it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That makes total sense. And that's why I was curious to hear about that because I'm like, I know these things happen, but I don't know how frequently it happens that it's a Sauce Labs issue versus an actual issue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How common would you say that is?
I honestly, we have not had. too many issues with them. I know that my automation engineer had some tickets going back and forth just again about like the latency and I think there was a problem with I forget what it was. I believe it was a certain environmental problem that I think it was an issue on both of our ends. So we kind of had to come together and figure out like what do we do to fix this. So he had a few
Mm.
meetings with them, but it's pretty few and far between. Like I said, it's more or less slowness and things are going to be slower. People are going to complain about that no matter what.
Yeah, if it's not, it's hard because the comparison is against your instant physical device that's right there in your hand, right? And you can touch and interact with it in real time. And like the sending that information through the internet to a device that lives somewhere else, it's always going to be slower. How do you overcome that?
Yeah, I don't think you can. We have to be happy with what we have, and it is what it is.
Yeah, and are you all happy with what you have? Like, do you enjoy that experience, or do you wish there was a better experience?
No, like I said, we actually were with somebody previously that's within that same realm, and this has been working pretty well. Definitely, it helps when you have customer service reps that are tentative to you. Sometimes,
Right.
I dealt with different ones within the QA world where it was very hard to get a hold of someone to fix a problem or to discuss the problem or anything like that. And I can say that this relationship has been pretty good so far.
Beautiful. Good to hear. What else did I want to ask you? Oh, going back to the automated testing that you all are doing, what kind of tools and technologies are you all using?
So, my automation engineer, he actually built his own framework. I know he used Selenium. He uses all the basics pretty much that anybody would use. So I'm not a subject matter expert or guru on automation, and he tells me some of this stuff, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're telling me, man. Like, as long as it's running, I
Yeah.
don't care.
Just speak to me in English, please.
Exactly. But yeah, so he actually built the framework up himself. He's been working in DevOps and automation for the past 25 years, something like that. So yeah, he's very trustworthy and I mean, he's doing a good job being a single man right now, doing this all himself.
Yeah. Yeah, and so is his primary role to take all the manual tests and convert them into automation?
Yeah, so we've been kind of trying to be strategic with that. So we've been going through our test cases, like our main regression test cases, and we use ADO Azure and we tag them,
Azure DevOps.
Azure DevOps, and we tag them then, automation. Like if we believe, like my manual testers will go in and tag the ones that they think are like the highest priority. So that's how he knows to query that and knows which ones to start working on. He has been working in a few other areas outside of even the digital banking area. Like we have a different LOS system for our mortgages and for our loan applications. So we have a lot of different systems. And unfortunately, my team's so small that we can't test all these systems. But sometimes we'll get the business unit come and do requests about automation or what we can do. So, we're always open to hear that and willing to see how we can help them. So he's been looking into some of that stuff as well.
How big is your team?
So I have 5 internally, and then I have some consultants. So it's 12 altogether.
And you 12 support the software for the entire organization?
That's correct. For the most part, we do all the internal testing for the digital banking application. And for these other applications that I'm talking about, a lot of times it's more or less a QA coordination. We're working with the business units. They're still doing the testing, but we're helping them build their test cases, making sure that they're going through and executing them. So if we have the rights and the access to help them test, then we more than happily step in and do that. But that's not always the case.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know if I've ever come across an organization that said we don't need any more testing.
I know, I know. If I could, I'd have 3 testers for each department.
Yeah. Yeah,
At
I
least.
think there yeah, a lot of conversations I have had or experiences that I've seen is, yeah, we can do it better, we can do it more efficiently, but almost nobody, I can't remember anyone ever saying like, "Hey guys, we're good on the testing, like let's stop." let's stop testing and let's do something else instead.
I completely agree, and I think that that is starting to become more apparent within my organization. Again, like I said, we just started in 2018, so we have grown dramatically. We started with one person in 2018, and
What
now we're
was
here.
that you?
No, it was actually somebody that's on my team now. I joined. Well, I actually joined in 2018 as a QA in a different. Everything was siloed out. It was a different structure at that point in time. But yeah, so I joined the IT QA team within 2020, and that's when we started bringing on more consultants, to backfill and everything. Sometimes they're a little bit easier than getting a full-time employee, especially if it's just because projects, flexing up and down, surge protection more or less. Like if we need people, then we have them. If we don't, then we don't, so. But yeah, I can definitely see that it's becoming more apparent that we do need more testers in different areas. Again, it's not really fair for the business unit to wear all these different hats and do their day-to-day work, but then also be forced to provide the same type of level of testing that QA does in general.
More to do more testers, or as you're trying to do it more efficiently, right? So I think in a lot of organizations, that's also a big push is, okay, we have these resources. How do we leverage today's technology to make everybody do more with less? And that's also why you're probably searching for like those AI solutions to see, because those are usually more efficient and more scalable than just adding more headcount. Because at some point, adding more headcount, every person hits their limit. And then again, is the decision of more headcount or can we make everybody more efficient?
Exactly, and I don't really think that that's even ideal right now. Just like not like the market's bad or anything, but if we can do more with less, then I think any organization is going to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think they can. I think from what we've seen, like that was actually a point I wanted to mention. You were talking about you're searching for some AI tools to help you. And I think a lot of times for us working in the organizations, hearing AI or hearing automation, we have a fear that it means replacement. But I don't think that's true. I think what it means is first evolution, because it's the normal cycle of every organization is you start with some kind of QA process, then you want to make it more efficient. And how do you make it more efficient? You do it with automation. But now there's also AI. So how do you make the automation more efficient? You use AI to make that process more efficient. And so it's ultimately becoming more efficient. And I think it's the people that are willing to join the revolution, the technology evolution that's going to happen no matter what, and that embrace it and use the tools to move along with the organization and help meet the organizational needs. Those people will always have a job.
I fully agree. And like you said, nothing's stopping this. It's going to come straight for us, regardless if we're on board or not.
Yes, exactly. So it's like join the movement because it's happening and you can't stop it. So you can throw up your hands, but then of course, if you throw up your hands and give up, that's when the reality of you being replaced set is real because the world is changing and you don't want to change with it. So what is the organization supposed to do?
Yep, I definitely see this. And again, there's so many people with seniority at my organization, and I can see this being kind of a struggle, but I kind of share that same sentiment with them. Like, come on, it's exciting. We need to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. I think it'll always be part of our role. Like it'll always be part of everybody's role in technology is adopting to new technologies and adopting to change because I think like technology is very rapidly changing and that will never stop.
I completely agree. There's no way that it can stop.
Yeah, exactly. It's I read a very cool book. I'm trying to remember its name. It was definitely around AI. I think it was like something around AI waves or the first wave of AI. But the guy, the author of the book, was talking about how there has never in history been a technology that once it's released to the public, it stops. You can't, once a technology is found, it can never be stopped. And so, except one technology has been controlled, is nuclear weapons. There, the discovery there didn't proliferate unlimitedly because the world realized how dangerous it is. And so, many countries around the world came together and said, hey, we have to put a stop to this and figure out how to control it so that it doesn't proliferate and kill the world. But everything else, once it's out, it'll proliferate unlimitedly and you can't stop it no matter what.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It's just it's crazy to see some of the technology that comes out, and then a year or so later you see the enhancements that have even been made to that from other people's ideas, that just continues to spark more of the enhancements. So it's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And for you as a manager, a question that comes to my mind is, how are you dealing with all of these changes and how are you like sharing that message with your team? Like, how are you keeping them, I don't know, maybe focused or not scared or even embracing these technological changes?
So I'm pretty close with my team. We talk all of us one on one, week to week, and then I always have my weekly team meeting. And so we bring up topics like this. I think it's good to be open. I let them bring topics to the board. We talk about any new technology, anything that they've seen, QA related. And so more or less, I think it's just the transparency is what makes things work on our end. Again, I have some senior people that they've been at the organization for a long time. So you always think, oh, they're going to be the ones least likely to change. So I knew I was going to have a little bit of a struggle there, but it has not been that way. Whenever I have demos with different software or anything like that, I include them if they're interested. I want them to be right up front with me. They're going to be the ones using this software, so I want their input and their feedback. So it's just that communication and transparency.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. What do you find are there like major concerns right now? Their major fears?
I don't know. I guess honestly, see, maybe I'm just being biased, but I think my team's actually pretty happy.
Yeah.
Maybe they just put
Huh,
that
I
faith into
wonder
me, though.
wonder why.
No, we have a great team, and I think some of their fears is just them being told. I know we talked about this already. That again, finding that middle ground where we're not getting scolded for over testing, but then we're not coming back and being scolded because we didn't test something. So that's still like when they're told and our backs are against the wall for a project deadline. That is like I know that they fear that because they're going to have to risk something that they would have tested just to get a project out on time. And I hate that they have to feel that way, and I understand why they do it, but sometimes, project deadlines can't move for specific reasons, and for valid reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point about balancing, right? Balancing risk mitigation with meeting deadlines. How do you all do that? What is your thought process?
So, again, it comes back to collaboration. I work very closely with EPMO and all of the project managers. Again, I know I brought up transparency multiple times, but that's the best thing you can do. When you start seeing a timeline that does not look feasible, your best bet is to call it out as soon as you see it. Or um, we're kind of going through that a little bit with some of our strategic projects now, and just making sure that the PMs and the project sponsors are all aware of this stuff. Again, we try to cut on some of the areas that we can, but it goes back to that whole what is cutting too much and what are we doing too much on this end. So we're trying to work on that and be better. But again, I think it's more or less a whole project team kind of thing.
You all measure your quality efforts somehow? Like, how do you know if you're doing a good job or not?
So we do have metrics, around bugs that we found, if we had to do any hop fixes, like how many hop fixes do we have to do? Like, why didn't we find the issues that cause those hop fixes? And we do have metrics around test cases ran, test cases created, that we do on a month to month basis. So we do have metrics around all that. I think the best metrics that we have are the defect ones. I mean, because me and the programming manager, we speak, on a daily basis. If I see in one release that for instance, the one release we had like 250 bugs, but the release before that, it was like 20 bugs. So like, what was the project that was going on? Where were the hangups? So these metrics are valuable. It's just a matter of like being able to read them and understand, what was going on at that point of time.
Yeah, that's great. Shannon, what do you think are some of your like most valuable lessons that you've learned so far?
Yeah. Overall, I think that is, being willing to take a risk, being flexible. This was my first manager position ever. And I must say that first year, like, and it was COVID happened right afterwards. So it was like I was trying to get to know my team and now we're all at home. And it was just I can tell you, I am not at the same place that I was 4 years ago. And but all I can say is that you take a risk, know that things are going to get better, know that you can work through things. Again, the flexibility, not necessarily going with the flow, but knowing that like things are going to change and things aren't always going to be how you think it's going to be. Just have an open mind to things, to say the least.
Yeah, I love all of that. Taking a risk and being flexible. I think very, very good attributes for any individual. Well, Shannon, thank you so much for joining me on the on Ultimate QA podcast. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you and have a beautiful day.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. See ya.
You too. Bye.